Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the Tractor Seat this week. Today, we're honored to have National Farmers Union President Rob Larew as our guest. And I'd like to remind everyone that our webinar is recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you miss it, have to leave, you can find it there. Rob, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Janet. For those of you that haven't had a chance yet to meet, I am Rob Larew. It is my honor to serve as the national president for Farmers Union, and have been a longtime member of the Farmers Union family through a lot of different works, particularly to Minnesota, having worked for Colin Peterson for a long time. That's where I got a lot of my background and support in what Farmers Union is all about, how they care about their communities in addition to their farms and livelihoods. And so glad to be doing this work, and really looking forward to today's important conversation.
Well, thank you, Rob. Do you want to start us off telling us about Fairness for Farmers, when it was launched and why it was launched?
Absolutely. I might, again, this is maybe new information for some, and for others who are very steeped in Farmers Union history, this may be a reminder for you. But I am first going to go back 120 years, right? And really the reason why issues around fairness for farmers and monopolies and making sure that farmers have a fair shake in the marketplace really is built into the DNA of who Farmers Union is. It is the reason why we came to be, really at a time in American history where control by so few players, railroads, for example, banks as another one, really controlled, just a handful of entities controlled so much of the US economy. And for farmers in particular, hugely put them at a disadvantage. And so along with the likes of President Teddy Roosevelt, there was a big momentum to try to get this under control, to bring more competition back into the marketplace. Farmers Union was right there along the way. This was also the beginning of a lot of the development of cooperatives in the US, certainly agricultural world. Again, trying to collectively work together to make sure that farmers have a fair place in the marketplace in order to get their goods to market, be able to buy goods off of the market in a competitive and fair manner. Much of the progress that we had with that original kind of trust busting, and then about 100 years ago, the creation of the Packers and Stockyards Act, really, it wasn't a perfect field for many years, but it was a much better place to be. And it really worked for a long time, bringing more competition to the meat packing industry, for example, and so many sectors of agriculture. But in the 1980s, the Department of Justice, this was at the time under the Reagan administration, decided that they're going to start reviewing each of these mergers and acquisitions for food companies, for ag companies, in a little bit different way. What they decided at that point, and this is really key, was they completely kind of reversed what they were doing, which was making sure that the market remained competitive all the way downstream, from consumer all the way down to the farmer in our situation, that it was fair and it remained competitive. And they completely ignored the downstream piece, and they only focused on the consumer side. And they said, if consumer prices are not severely impacted, then the mergers can go through and it's okay for the economy. Well, there were certainly those, including Farmers Union, that was concerned about what that might do. But what we've seen over the last decades has unfortunately really proven that those fears were well placed. And that is because consolidation in agriculture has hugely ramped up. We now have a less competitive marketplace than Teddy Roosevelt was facing way back 120 years ago. We have fewer packers controlling more of the market, for example, in the beef industry. And really, we've seen now everything from consumers' options of where to buy products. So the retail sector, whether we're talking about Walmart, whether we're talking about Amazon and so forth, but even in just the food chain itself, from food companies and then from the farmers world, who we're selling our goods to, processing industry, and so forth. It is so severely concentrated right now, and it puts all of us at a big disadvantage. And that really, to stop and take a breath here for just a minute, is why this is so important to Farmers Union and why we're doing this big push right now on fairness for farmers. And in many ways has been a part of who we are as an organization from the very beginning.
And the Fairness for Farmers campaign itself launched last fall, correct?
That's right. It really, I might argue that it launched initially with a push from the White House. We have, when the last presidential election was coming to bear, Farmers Union always makes sure that we share what we want to see happen in the food and agriculture policy world with both candidates as we're going into a general election. So that was shared with both of them. And then when the election was passed and President Biden, even before he was sworn in, we were again sharing with the administration these priorities, including getting some kind of control over the lack of the consolidation in agriculture, the lack of competition. And so the administration has been hearing from us on this issue right from the very start. Then we had a launch by the White House with an executive order that asked not just USDA, as we've seen in the past, try to do kind of a review about this, but he's asked all of his agencies. So this includes Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, and USDA among those to really look top to bottom and to see how the government can work together to make a fairer marketplace out there, because they also recognize this isn't just a question of fairness for farmers, but also a fairness for consumers out there. And then on top of that, we launched the Fairness for Farmers campaign here within our organization, building upon that work and also working closely with our Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate, because this is one of these issues that I also like to stress to folks is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's really one about fairness. And both administrations since Reagan, Democratic Republican administrations have really been a part of this consolidation in agriculture. And so it's going to take both Republicans and Democrats to be able to get a handle on this. Out in the countryside, when you talk about this issue, when you're in the cafe and so forth, folks don't talk about it as a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. It really is this question of fairness. And that's why when we launched this campaign, we had lots of folks who aren't even Farmers Union members saying it's about time somebody took this issue on. And that's why we're here.
Well, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate about that because I read that it's just normal. Businesses go through cycles, they merge and they position themselves to merge and get bigger, and it's more efficient and it's better for consumers if businesses are consolidated. Why is that not the case from the Farmers Union standpoint?
Well, certainly there's lots of reasons why it's not the case. And certainly if I'm in the boardroom in Brazil for a company like JBS, I'm always going to be making this case that more efficient. And if I have more control of the marketplace, that is going to be better for shareholders, for the families that are in control of it. That all makes a lot of sense from their point of view. But we make the case that this is never a good thing for consumers and certainly for farmers as well. But if we didn't make our case well enough before the pandemic, when the pandemic happened, I think that opened the eyes of a lot of folks. And for consumers out there, they finally saw one of the most critical points of a super concentrated food industry is when you have a glitch, like a supply chain problem with a pandemic, but that can be led by a disaster out there. We may see multiple kinds of disruptions. You've also seen these cyber attacks. What we see when we have each of these disruptions, whether it's a pandemic or cyber attack or something else, is the fact when you have so few in this place, farmers have to end up euthanizing animals and suffer the losses there. You have folks who suffer huge losses because they can't get their cattle to market. You had dairy farmers who were pouring milk out down the drain and so forth because requires that you have more market activity, and that is more diversity in that market activity. And so the places in our food chain which weren't all that disrupted were those who were selling direct into markets. But obviously, we saw disruptions there in some cases as well. But looking forward, to be prepared. And certainly, a big effort is going into right now, restoring in many ways the local and regional markets that we have so that we're no longer talking about global or relying on global efficiencies and global markets because these food systems need both. And ultimately, that food security is what consumers are looking for. And they know that for cost reasons, for reliability reasons, that we need to do something different. Farmers have known this all along, and that's a big push for the campaign.
Well, and Senator Tester has been a big champion of this, working and sponsoring, isn't there a price transparency bill that he's sponsoring to help with, in the particular, the meat processing sector?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, one of the big challenges, again, that kind of came to bear and were really highlighted really was the lack of fairness in the beef industry, right? And for a lot of independent ranchers out there and cow-calf operators and so forth, the whole market was really so concentrated and so controlled by just a few players that it set the course of a lot of disadvantages there, and resulting in a lot of losses during the pandemic, and really highlighted to need to bring some fairness back to that market. So part of that is the fact that unlike we now have a chicken market that has absolutely no cash market. There is no price discovery there at all. It is completely monopolized by just a couple of players, and those growers are at the behest of their contracts and the integrators. Then you have the hog industry, which is quickly approaching that same level. In the beef industry, there is still a small cash market where farmers can actually see what the prices are. But in terms of more information about some of these contracts, these marketing contracts that they have with some of the processors, that is still a lot of dark information. And so there's a couple of efforts afoot right now within Congress to try to change the system, bring more of a cash market to bear, and bring more transparency, shine some light on some of these contracts. So again, it's not guaranteeing that independent ranchers and farmers out there can win or get a profit even, but it can guarantee or better guarantee some fairness in the market. And that's a big part of the whole project. So we have our allies and huge champions like Senator Tester, who's pushing this. We also have Senator Grassley along with that, and many others. And Minnesota, I have to stop and just say, has been just a huge support. Certainly, Minnesota Farmers Union has stepped up and led the charge in many ways. And as a result of that, you now have a huge part of your congressional delegation, from senators championing this to our members of the House of Representatives. You have an attorney general and a governor. And we might as well give a shout out to your commissioner of agriculture, who are all echoing the need for change here. That doesn't just have an impact in Minnesota, but the leadership that they're sharing has a big impact, certainly upon the halls of Congress, but it also has a big impact on fellow attorneys general across all the states, because you have Minnesota's leadership with Keith Ellison. He's not just doing it in Minnesota, he's sharing this information with his fellow attorneys general across the entire country. You also have in your governor someone who is sharing that message out to other states as well. That's the type of work that we want to even see more of, right? Because that's the momentum that is going to lead to lasting change.
And as you point out, it's bipartisan. Senator Grassley is a Republican from Iowa. The governor and attorney general are both Democrats in Minnesota. So yes, it doesn't fall neatly in one political party or the other.
That's right. And again, too often, and we have a lot of important issues out there that unfortunately can sometimes fall along those kind of political lines. But this question of competition in the marketplace and making sure that our capitalist market is actually functioning in a way that it was designed to be truly competitive, and that makes sure that you have transparency in that marketplace, that you have real competition. All of those elements really is part of who we are as a U.S. economy and system, and less so about the political party.
I wanted to open it up for questions. If folks have questions, please sure to put those in the chat. I did want to talk if there's anything. We in Minnesota were Cargill Continental, and when they were going to come together to purchase Sanderson Farms, you said that was perhaps part of a change in how the DOJ is looking at projects going forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, news of this acquisition is really disturbing and alarming. And we have communicated that back to Department of Justice, to USDA, and so forth. And we're still hopeful that we might be able to slow that down. But maybe I'm always an eternal optimist, be eternally optimistic, but work like hell to actually make sure positive change happens, I guess. Is the fact that the Department of Justice right now is undergoing a review of how they decide whether or not a merger or an acquisition goes forward. This is the fundamental piece that was changed that I referred to back in the 80s on how they it suddenly looked at just consumer prices and so forth. That system of review to see whether or not these mergers can go forward is undergoing a huge change in process right now. Right now, they're taking input on that. We're very much a part of that, making sure that farmers unions message is in there. We expect that process will move forward a little bit more into the fall with the idea that we might have a new system in place by the end of the year. Now, I don't want to put too many eggs in one basket, right? That's just one piece of what we're going to be talking about, because part of the problem is that we already have the consolidation that we have. We don't want it to get any worse, but we have to deal with what we have now. And this review process won't help us with that. That's why some of these other bills like Tester and really Senator Klobuchar leading the way in changing the way that our antitrust laws work, making sure that we have the resources in our DOJ and FTC to make sure that they even have enough people to review this kind of stuff. These are the kinds of things that we're going to need in addition to a change in the review.
We have a question about the antitrust enforcement action by Attorney General Ellison against Cargill. And I don't think either you or I can speak to that, but I have another comment about how consolidation doesn't just impact agriculture, it also impacts healthcare. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's very much a part of it, right? And it's part of the reason why rural healthcare continues to really suffer. It's a complicated issue, and there's a lot of issues around it. But we know that consolidation in the healthcare system has led to the closing of rural facilities out there, and that makes it even more difficult for folks to get access to quality care. The nice thing that I was talking about, President Biden signing the executive order. I think I mentioned to you that was across government. So that also included Health and Human Services and the secretary there. We had a meeting with him a number of months ago now, but this issue around consolidation in healthcare was very much on his radar screen. So certainly that's another piece. I might just, in addition to healthcare, we know of the consolidation in the tech sector. and the fact that there's so few options there, really controlling a lot of things. That's getting a lot of attention also in the halls of Congress, and that's good for us. Some folks might complain because, wait a minute, well, what about ag and the farm sector? But if we get action in one of these places, then we can make sure that action in food and ag also helps. For too long, nobody was willing to take on consolidation and antitrust issues anywhere. And so if we get some movement there, we'll be able to hopefully translate that into the food and ag sector.
And one of the other areas is right to repair. Folks not being able to repair their equipment. So that when you bring up technology, that's certainly related.
Absolutely. And so a lot of times folks sometimes in the food and ag sector might focus on Department of Justice because they know that they have a big part of kind of the review and maybe the enforcement of these laws out there, and USDA, right, because of the agriculture sector. But it's actually the Federal Trade Commission also reviews a number of these mergers and acquisitions. They have a big role in this. And one of those roles actually is very much centered on the right to repair. And the current chair of the Federal Trade Commission is hugely involved in this, wants to see action. And this is another hopeful area where we're going to see some change.
Is there anything that members of Farmers Union can do? Is this a place where they contact their lawmakers? Is that something that they could do? How do they get involved?
Well, we are a grassroots organization, right? So it is never a top-down; it is a bottom-up organization. And Farmers Union members have already stepped up. I'll talk in just a minute about other things that folks can do. But even a year ago, we reached out to Farmers Union members across the entire family, asking folks to step up and tell their story, because stories are what make this issue more tangible to folks so that they can understand, but what does this really mean for me, right? And sometimes those stories are about how a farm operation had to go out of business because prices got so low because of consolidation and the marketplace being dried up, that they simply had to get much bigger and hope to survive. That kind of, keep getting efficient. How many dairy farmers have we lost with that argument? But then, there are also the stories of those who stepped out of that, tapped into value-added markets and so forth, and had success. And so that also is an important part of this story, because we know that there is a better way when we have more local and regional marketplaces. That's a big part of it. Farmers Union members in Minnesota stepped up. We have probably hundreds of hours at this point of testimonials from across the country from farmers, some of which are so compelling, and members break down in tears because of the impact that they may have had from an integrator, from one of the chicken processing or hog companies, and the impact that it had on their ability to try to farm and provide food for the American people. Those stories are being shared with Capitol Hill, 2 members of Congress. That, along with things like fly-ins and contacting your members of Congress to support bills such as the tester bill that you brought up. All of these things build, again, this momentum. Farmers Union members have also stepped up in other ways, not directly related to fairness for farmers, but the recent introduction of an amazing food now being produced at Minnesota Farmers Union's own restaurant there in Minneapolis is another great example of showing by example when you are connected, closely to your farmers out there, and you're giving those members strong markets and market opportunity beyond just 1 or 2. That's the kind of system, again, that we're trying to model for everyone, that we're having options. Not that everybody can do that, but we need more market diversity out there. And that's a big thing that Minnesota has stepped up. Minnesota has stepped up again by also not just working closely with Attorney General Keith Ellison, but also providing money to have a fellowship offered there which is specifically related to agriculture consolidation. That's the kind of commitment again, and we're seeing some of that play out across the farmers union footprint, but telling their story, putting really their money where their mouth is on an issue like this by opening up in a restaurant, by funding support for ag consolidation issues. Those are all really big pieces. I might preview a couple of things that are coming up here soon. There will be radio ads running across a sector of the footprint to make this even go further out there beyond the Farmers Union family. And within Farmers Union's Fairness for Farmers website, which is at fairnessforfarmers.org, there is now there and on social media an explainer video, because this issue is complicated. And so when you're talking to your consumers and your neighbors and so forth, what does this even mean? Why is this important to me? So we tried to consolidate that in just, I think, a 60-second or 90-second explainer why this is important to all of us and why this campaign is so critical that we move it forward. And so those are the types of things. And then everybody has continuing great ideas there, which is just going to continue to push this campaign forward.
Rob, could you share that website again for folks to go to?
Absolutely. Fairnessforfarmers.org. If you go to NFU's website, nfu.org, you will also find a link to it.
Thank you. And I'm going to take this opportunity to toss it to Kyle Hoffman to tell us about a special project that we have coming up in Minnesota to help fund things like that fellowship at the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm going to share my screen. We've got an exciting thing coming up here soon. Well, actually, it's wrapped now, but let me share this. We're going to be kicking off the Trust Buster, which is a fundraiser we're doing through our foundation. As you'll see here pictured, I hope you can see that at least. It's a Ranger that looks like this, but it won't look like this. It's wrapped in Trust Buster related imagery. So on the side, we have a Trust Buster logo, which you'll actually see at the bottom here, and it'll have Farmers Union logo. It'll have Fairness for Farmers messaging. It has the website that Rob alluded to on the side there too. So this will be all wrapped. It actually is wrapped, but I'd show you a picture of it, but we're unveiling it at Farm Fest. So that's still a closely guarded secret until we take the sheet off of the vehicle. So this is what the vehicle looks like, not wrapped. And you can enter to win. We're going to be selling raffle tickets. There's only 500 tickets that'll be available. And we're selling that to support our work on these issues and support our work through the foundation and educate kids about cooperation at our summer camps. And this is just a flyer we have that folks can pick up at Farm Fest. We're going to be unveiling the Trust Buster at Farm Fest the very first day, 8 a.m. Janet?
8:30, and Rob and Gary will be taking off the wrap to unveil.
Yes. So President Wordish here with MFU, and then President Larew will both be there, as well as Attorney General Keith Ellison. We have confirmed to do a short presentation of the Trust Buster, and we'll unveil that there and sell tickets at Farm Fest, and that's kind of where we're kicking this thing off. So come, if you're at Farm Fest, come see us, come see President Larew, come see Attorney General Ellison, and most importantly, come see the Trust Buster and sit in it and buy a raffle ticket so you can win it. And we'll be doing the final drawing at our state convention in November. So at the state convention, we'll be picking a winner for this thing. So that's the Trust Buster. Like I said, we'll have the wrap version promoted here after Farm Fest after it's unveiled. So Janet, I'll kick it back to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I figure out how to do that.
Well, thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Rob, do you want to make any closing comments?
Absolutely. I could talk about this issue for a long time, and I would love to have more engagement and so forth. So I do hope folks can come out to Farm Fest. I would love to visit with you more about this. But there are countless ways that you guys have stepped up in so many ways, and that the organization, through the support of members, has been able to do this. Again, really putting their own resources, including resources from Farmers Union enterprises out there, work to build more meat processing capacity in Minnesota, more education so that we get more meat cutters out there who are experienced in this. All of these efforts combined are really going to not just take bite out of the consolidation and so forth, but make sure that we have that better system in place behind it so that we can all benefit from it. But this is a huge issue. It'll be, again, front and center for us for a very long time. And we have a lot of exciting things planned going forward for fairness for farmers. Really appreciate all of Minnesota Farmers Union's support and all the efforts that you've taken.
Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you all for joining us in the Tractor Seat. We look forward to seeing you again as we start next season, probably in January. Thank you all.